There's a narrative that's been perpetuated for decades now that Amy Hennig single-handedly created the greatest world ever with the best story ever, can do no wrong, and if you aren't with me, you are against me, and I hate you. This is all false. Amy Hennig didn't do much for the legacy of Kain, and I will explain why. I'm making this video ahead of the No-Clip documentary. While I think the No-Clip documentary is going to be really cool, is going to shed some light on the legacy of Kain and Amy's part and everything in it, I don't believe that Amy Hennig added much to the legacy of Kain universe. Documentaries are a fickle thing in that on one hand they can be great information tools, and on the other hand all they are is PR safe speak. It's going to be a lot of PR speak, guys. All of these people in this documentary are industry veterans, are trying to get into the industry, or have been in the industry for quite some time. They want to stay in the industry, they want to keep their job, and they want future opportunities later on down the line. No documentary is going to talk absolute bullshit about what really happened. If you read between the lines, you can often find the real answers between documentary answers, but most of the time it's all safe speak. Documentaries are made where they will talk to them, they will get a good answer, and then they will cut, have them find a nice way to say whatever they were trying to articulate, and then film what they were saying. Oftentimes you get the truth or the real answers when the documentary questionnaire answering person goes off sort of script and is like, oh wait, can I say that? Can I actually say that? Is that okay? Blah, 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 blah. Stuff like that. That's when you get the real answers. Everything else is heavily advised and scripted. You can find the answers here by just looking at Crystal Dynamics. Look at how they've operated the last 10 years. If you've liked the new Tomb Raider games, cool, but there's a lot of fans who haven't. That's why a lot of fans were excited about the Tomb Raider remasters. If you look at how Crystal Dynamics has handled core design in the past, you can absolutely see that there's like the cool developers of Crystal Dynamics who just like making games and having fun, and then you have the corporate suits of Crystal Dynamics who are just absolutely awful. Something you guys can look out for in this documentary is if any of these people are asked a question and they immediately answer or think about it for a minute and then answer, oh yeah, they're great people, we have a great relationship, blah, 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 I guarantee you they're bullshitting. But let me quit rambling. What do I mean by Amy Hennig didn't really do much for this series? Well, it starts off with the splash screen of Blood Omen 1. In Blood Omen 1, there's a splash screen that says, the concept, ideas, and world of Kain were developed, created, and made by Dennis Dyack and the members at Silicon Knights. That's clue number 1, folks. We all know the story by now that Shifter was going to be the original version of Soul Reaver. It was meant to be some sort of biblically focused game about like post-apocalypses or whatever, possibly set in a diesel steampunk world. There's some concept art that I'll look around for and throw it up on screen. But needless to say, it was going to be Raziel, still Terrell, still all of his biblically accurate named brothers, going around killing them for actual God, I guess, and he has to kill biblical Kain or something, and destroys the world or saves the world or whatever. The original ending of Soul Reaver was everyone fucking dies. But then IDOS or publisher Crystal Dynamics, it's weird. There's IDOS, and you have Crystal Dynamics the developer, and then Crystal Dynamics the publisher. So whether it was IDOS or Crystal Dynamics the publisher, forcing sort of Legacy of Kain to become this franchise and new IP because they knew they had lightning in a bottle, they had to make more sequels. But if we start this all off, we need to talk about Raziel. Raziel is an original creation of Amy Hennig, but it was not created for the Legacy of Kain. Keep that in mind. Next up, the other big contender here, the Hilden and Ancient Vampire War. I've talked about this in another video about books that Legacy of Kain fans should read, going over this a little bit. The Hilden and Ancient Vampire War, that was a product of Blood Omen 2. Steve Ross, the lead artist for Blood Omen 2, was also a writer on that project. Probably the lead writer, I want to say. Amy had to take that concept in this idea that Stephen Ross created for another canceled game called Sirens and put into Blood Omen 2, and she had to put that into Soul Reaver 2 and Defiance. Long story short, she didn't come up with that idea either. The world building for Legacy of Kain, Amy Hennig didn't contribute much to the world building either. The Soul Reaver, Kain himself, Nosgoth as a kingdom. It wasn't the world, it was a kingdom with Blood Omen 1. was all created by Dennis Dyack. We all know this. Sure, there are Reaver forges that are Amy's idea, and I would like to say the further backstory detailing the Hilden and Vampire War was Amy's as well, but that still comes from Blood Omen 2 in the Sirens comic. Amy had to find a way to answer the #GET question, and how does she do that? Bam. Because the Blood Omen 2 team actually basically came up with an ending for that entire story as is, she gave us the answer in Defiance, and it was purely from the cut content with Tyrell. Yes, Defiance leads into Blood Omen 2, shock. All of this stuff, all the Hilden and Vampire stuff, and everything else comes from Sirens, this comic, Stephen Ross, Blood Omen 2, all of that. Everything else, the world of Nosgoth wasn't Amy's. That wasn't Amy's at all. That was Dennis Dyack and Ken McCulloch's, and I think Jim Curry. There's another writer, Jim Curry, I believe, who also helped with all that stuff as well. The Seraphan army also isn't something that Amy Hennig created. The Seraphan were all the way back in Blood Omen 1 in 1996. The Order of Light, I believe they're called. I'll find the clip and put it in.
Obscure artifacts in that museum, I discovered an ancient chronicle. This passage caught my eye. It was during these dark times, infested with the plague of the undead, that the Circle brought the Seraphan to existence. Trained to be devoutly loyal to the Circle and the perfect exterminators of the undead scourge, they were led to many victories by the righteous Paladin, Malek, protector of the Pillar of Conflict. They cleansed the vampires with fire and released their souls to more blessed realms. There is no wrath as terrible as that of the righteous. I'd read enough. At once, disgusted and intrigued, I placed the book back down in that museum.
But needless to say, the Seraphan army being a religious, crusading, zealot cast of humans who slaughter vampires by the dozens was not an original idea. This hurts to say, but every little world-building beat detail that is in the entire Legacy of Kain series was not created by Amy. The only thing she did was create the post-apocalyptic world, which wasn't actually part of Legacy of Kain in the first place, blah, blah. There's a whole thing. Now, is Amy a bad writer? Hell no. Is Soul Reaver and Defiance and everything like that great? Yes, it is. I love those games. I really do. But her contribution overall wasn't that much, as I've just pointed out. There's a lot more examples here that I could bullet point, but that would just get really long and really tedious and annoying after a while, because you would realize that the world that you thought Amy Hennig built and made up wasn't actually hers. It would just piss everyone off. And I actually feel bad for Amy Hennig because she never really got to tell the story that she wanted to tell. I imagine she had this great idea for Shifter. I imagine it was going to be fucking awesome, and it would have been another lightning in a bottle project. But because it had to be shoehorned into the Legacy of Kain universe to hold that IP rights, then she had to sort of pivot and create something else and wrap it around someone else's work. And it's almost every chance she got, every corner she turned, something was an obstacle. The Blood Omen 2 team had no input or back and forth talk with the Soul Reaver 2 and Defiance team at all. Like, I have no idea why, that's just how it was. So Amy had to take their ideas from Blood Omen 2, Steve Ross's ideas from Sirens and everything else that he put into that game, and put them into Soul Reaver 2 and Defiance. Blood Omen 2 started development shortly after Soul Reaver launched in 1998 or 1999, and it was released a couple of years later. It was a super crunch mode game. Not to mention, Amy Hennig sort of got fed up and quit Crystal Dynamics before Defiance launched. Now, whether you want to believe whoever or whichever article you've read you want to believe or whatever it happens, Amy Hennig left. And I remember this because it's burned into my brain from all the forum articles and all the news stuff that came out around the time of Defiance. Of course, it's all lost to time now because fucking the Internet Archive went down or something. But Amy Hennig left the Defiance development team like 6 months before the game launched to go work on Jak and Daxter and Uncharted. Now, obviously, again, the No Clip documentary might say something completely fucking different, and that's the truth that I'm talking about. They will never, nobody ever, it doesn't matter what documentary it is, whether it's Legacy of Kain or something else, maybe even Valve. I want to say the Valve documentary for Half-Life 2, that was really good, and maybe Gabe Newell is the only one who doesn't give a shit about the industry because he has more money than God. But everyone else, every other developer will never tell you the whole truth simply because they want to hold on to their job. And with how fickle the game industry really is, and with how fickle just Hollywood in general, or even just modern day political bullshit really is, nobody wants to lose their jobs. So they always have to try to say nice things. It's that never ending negative, positive reinforcement that is infecting today's media. You can never say anything bad about anybody. You can never say anything negative about anything, or people will jump down your throats immediately. I love The Witcher, for example, but The Witcher is 100% plagiarism and copyright infringement. And if you took both authors, Michael Moorcock and Andrei Sapkowski, who wrote The Witcher and Elric respectively, that to court and held up all the bullet points of how they're similar, and the things that come from Elric first because it was published in the 60s and the 70s, and the things that come from The Witcher because it was published in the late 80s and early 90s together, and you took it to a copyright infringement lawyer or something, The Witcher, because I've been playing it a lot, Elric would win immediately purely from publication date alone. It's that stuff that they will never ever admit to in any documentary. In the freaking Witcher documentaries from NoClip, which was, I believe, their first ones, or their first, huge ones anyway, they will never tell you that, hey, Elric was an inspiration, quote unquote, for The Witcher, or Elric is absolutely plagiarism or copyright law. No one will ever say that. There's some fine print or invisible hidden rule that no documentary can say anything negative at all. And if there is something negative, it's the speaker who's being asked the question because they have full conviction over it. I love Legacy of Kain. I think Amy Hennig is great, but she really didn't do much for Legacy of Kain at all. Please, in the comments, I already can hear you guys banging on your keyboards. In the comments, please, pull up the receipts, y'all, for your proof that Amy did this and Amy did that. And if it doesn't come back to it was originally created in Blood Omen, it's part of the Blood Omen Legacy of Kain lore. It was there in the beginning. There is a trail of Dennis Dyak's narrative storytelling or whatever. If it doesn't come back to that, then you can say Amy Hennig created this or that. Soul Reaver, as I said, Soul Reaver is mostly an original idea. The only thing that has is it's sitting on top of the wrapper that is Legacy of Kain. If you take out all the Legacy of Kain stuff, then it's Shifter, essentially. I'm sure the Soul Reaver wouldn't be in there, but if it is in there, then it would totally be an homage to the Soul Reaver from Legacy of Kain. Let's imagine for a second that Legacy of Kain is its own separate IP, and Shifter is its own separate IP for a minute. There would be things undoubtedly drawn from both series, I bet you. Dennis Dyack was going to freaking create a reboot of Legacy of Kain called Omen or whatever, but it was canceled in 2016. Paul Scott Canavan released a bunch of the concept art. There's a lot more that he won't show us, but the stuff that he did show us, it looked like it was going to be a really cool reboot. And we would have gotten to see what Dennis Dyack's take on Raziel would have been. I do think Raziel as a character is great. I do think the overall narrative of the Soul Reaver trilogy is also great. After all, it is more of the series than Blood Omen ever was. But without Blood Omen and Dennis Dyack and Silicon Knights laying the foundation, then Legacy of Kain wouldn't be what it is today.